In fact, I think I was the youngest game director at Naughty Dog. I was also like the youngest lead designer. I joined to work on Uncharted 4.
Oh, okay.
I worked on the multiplayer side of Uncharted 4. I ended up actually working on the single player as well. Like, no offense, but like I was like, okay, I feel like I'm at least as good as this guy is. If he can get an interview with Naughty Dog, maybe I should try it. He is a really good game designer. Like, he's not just a storyteller. He's also has a really strong game design sense. And I remember my boss telling me like, "Hey, I don't think you're cut out to be a game designer." That there were people who literally started selling real world drugs to get money to pay for playing the game. And I was like, what the hell? What? A lot of that came from a very personal experience I've had, where I've had kind of like, I want to call it near death experiences, but really threatening experiences.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vinit, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for agreeing to do this on such a short notice. I'm sure you're busy working on your game. We'll get to that. We'll get to that later. But let me tell you, just the fact that you've worked with Naughty Dog before, my audience is gonna love this conversation, and I'm sure you know the kind of fan following that India has for Last of Us, for Naughty Dog in general, and the kind of work you guys have been doing for so long. So this is going to be exciting for sure.
I appreciate it. No, I'm excited to talk about it. It's been a great journey on my end, and I'm very proud of what I've been able to do.
Yeah. So you're someone who went from being an Indian American kid to leading AAA tier projects at a company like Naughty Dog, right? Take us back to that very beginning. What exactly made you fall in love with games?
Oh yeah, I'll tell you, I've been playing games since I was like 2 years old. Honestly, I grew up playing games partially because my brothers played games. My brothers are both older than I am. So one brother is 10 years older than me, and my other brother is 6 years older than me,
Hmm.
and they both played video games. So I kind of grew up in a household with a Nintendo Entertainment System in the house. We used to play old NES games like Contra and Mario Brothers and stuff. So I kind of grew up with that as a kid. And I was fortunate enough, I grew up in suburban New York, and there were quite a few other Indian families there. And a lot of those other Indian families had kids around my age, and they all also played video games. So I grew up from a young age playing video games with my Indian friends, and it was a little bit of a thing. We'd have these Indian parties where the five families would meet together
Yeah.
at like 8 p.m. and they would have dinner, and they have chai, and we'd be together till like 2 in the morning,
Right.
and the kids would be downstairs playing video games the whole night, and it was like a dream for us. And every time we said that we were, the parents said, "Okay, let's go now, chalo, chalo, let's go home." They would make another cup of chai,
Yeah.
and we would get one more hour of gaming. And then at the end, before we left, they'd be like, "Okay, we would beg for a sleepover." They're like, "Okay, can we just do a sleepover? Can they just stay at our house tonight and we can play more games?"
Yeah.
And we'd beg and beg and beg, and eventually they would say, "Okay, fine," and then they let us have a sleepover. So we play games all night. Games are a big part of my childhood. Um, I played it so much, my parents were actually concerned that I was getting too addicted. I'm sure every Indian family, every
Yeah.
Indian kid who's played video games can relate to this. My parents were worried I wasn't studying enough. They said I was too addicted to games. But I was so passionate about games that I always convinced them that no, this is good for me. I'm having fun. I'm having fun with my friends. I'm still doing my homework. I'm still getting good grades. So they kind of just gave up on trying to get me to get away from games. They couldn't tear me away from it. Many years later, they're actually thankful that I was as into games as I was because I made a career out of it. Something that they brag to their family friends about.
Yeah.
They're like, "Oh, my he's in games, and he's at this game company. He's making his own game company now."
But did
It's
they
something that they did brag.
did they like, because you have the background uh, having Indian parents, like did they have this concern of like a proper route of doing engineering and all those tech related jobs? Did they ever force you to actually get to that and not?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question. So I think I'm a little bit lucky in that, my parents migrated to the U.S. and so they already saw a difference in culture, where
Yeah.
that there's a lot more openness to trying different careers. My mom would always tell me the story that she grew up really into math,
Hmm.
but her father didn't believe that women should do math, that women are better suited for other areas, and so he actually didn't let her pursue studies in math, and she always regretted that. And so she told me that this is something she wanted to do for us, the three of us, or the three sons, was give us the chance to pursue something that we're passionate about. So even despite all those concerns, she said, "Okay, let them explore, let them do the thing that they like." And I guess I was also lucky that my oldest brother naturally was into programming and computer science, so they were pretty satisfied with that.
Yeah.
The middle brother, I'm the youngest of the three. The middle brother was like totally into the arts and music and stuff. And I think by contrast, at least I wasn't that. So they thought, okay, I'm kind of in the middle. I'm not totally computer science. I'm not also totally arts. So I think they gave me kind of the benefit of the doubt, and I think I really kind of benefited from that relationship. And ultimately, the way I remember convincing them, so I went to high school and I started studying computer science in high school, and then I got into a program in computer science at UC Santa Cruz in California, and it's a computer science game design program. And I remember first off, they were very excited for me, like, okay, great, there's actually a program for this now. You can study in college. But they also said that, okay, it's great. I convinced them that at least it's a computer science degree. So even if I don't go into games, I could still work in, standard IT like Google or Apple or something.
Yeah.
So they give them a lot of, you know, it calmed them a lot. But then, yeah, I mean, despite all that, I managed to get into the industry and do really well. So I think in retrospect, their belief to pursue your passion was the right thing for me. It got me to where I am now, and I think they're really proud that they gave me that space.
I can actually relate to this because we are two brothers. My elder brother went through that straightforward, path where did engineering, MBA, IIMs, all of that, and then I was the experimental kid, right?
Yeah.
So they were like, "Cool, okay, one guy is we've done everything with him. Let him do what he wants to do," and
We, I mean, we both benefit from being the younger son. They kind of got all their fears out of the way already. So we
yeah.
have our older siblings to thank.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, what was your first role in the industry, and what did you really study to get there?
Mm, yeah. So, like I mentioned, I studied computer science game design at UC Santa Cruz. Our senior project was to make an actual game with a team. That was the senior project. I'm actually very proud that they had that as a requirement for the program because it required practical experience. Okay, you're going to practice a new game. We're not talking about studying graphics, studying AI, studying algorithms. We're saying let's make a real game. So I actually led that team. We made an iPhone game called Stack and Deploy. So not the greatest name, but the game is basically it's a real-time strategy card game that you play on your iPhone, and you can play it online. And it was a game that I really believe was quite fun. We actually had a lot of people play test it. We released it on the App Store. We actually made a few $1,000s off of it, which was really cool
Yeah.
as like basically students. Um, and that helped me land my first job in the industry because at the end of the senior year, they have you present your games to the school. And one of the recruiters from Zynga was in the audience. He watched me give the presentation about our game, and he was quite impressed with what the game was, how we presented it. And so he offered to connect me to the recruiting team at Zynga to get a job potentially as a game designer. At the same time, I was applying to game programming jobs, and I actually had a job offer for both a game programming job down in Los Angeles or a game design job up in San Francisco. And I picked the game design job because I felt, okay, you know what? It's harder to get a game design job than to get a game programming job. It's harder to break into the game design industry
Yeah.
than the programming side. And so I decided to make that call, even though it paid less than the programming job.
But was it
And
your first choice? Like game design is something that is really close to you than programming, or you just chose because of this reason?
well, it's funny because at that time I was kind of an all around developer. When we made that project, I had the programming, design, even like visual design and everything. So I actually hadn't quite found what is my real spirit as a developer. And I mean, it's so obvious in retrospect. I know I'm definitely a game designer more than anything else. But at that time, I didn't quite know.
Yeah.
But I felt that if I wanted to be a game designer professionally, this was my chance. And so I took it, and I went to go to work at Zynga. And that was an interesting experience. But yeah, I mean, that's how I started it, anyways.
Yeah, got it, got it. You want to talk about that experience as well?
Absolutely. So it was a cool experience to begin with because one of the reasons I wanted to work at Zynga was my friend from childhood, all the way back in New York, was also working there.
Okay.
And we had a dream of working together on the same project and all that stuff. And there was finally an opportunity to do so. But it was a jarring experience for me because I just come from designing like a game. And Zynga, as you probably know, doesn't really make conventional games.
Yeah.
They make like, they make free to play mobile. At that time it was Facebook. It wasn't even mobile yet.
So that
And they
this
make
is like Farmville and Mafia Wars era.
exactly. Yeah. So I was put on the Mafia Wars 2 project. They're making a sequel to Mafia Wars as a game designer.
Okay.
And what I realized working on that project was like, this is not the kind of game design I want to do. This is like a bunch of spreadsheets, and the game design is not for gamers, it's for non-gamers.
Yeah.
And so you're having to like take away all of your game design instincts to make something that's more designed to extort people out of their money. That's really what the design is. And I was like, I'm a passionate gamer. I've been a gamer, as I mentioned, since I was a kid. I love like Japanese style games and games with like really strong action to it. And making those games, it felt like a job, not like a passion.
Yeah.
And I remember at some point really trying to push the design because Mafia Wars 1 was very like click buttons kind of game.
Yeah.
Mafia Wars 2 was more of like an open world design. They wanted to make a design that's like third person. You would kind of like Diablo style where you click around and move around the world.
Right.
And so I was pushing them to kind of like enhance the design. Let's make the combat a little bit more interesting, a little more involved. Let's make it almost like a turn-based RPG. And I remember them telling me like, I don't think our audience will understand what health bars is. I don't think they'll understand like how a health bar works. And I'm like, are you sure? Like, I feel like we can make this happen. And I remember pushing really hard, and they pushed back on me a lot. And I was really starting to doubt the game. And I felt like I don't think this game is going to satisfy anyone because it's not quite as simple as Mafia Wars 1, but it isn't enough of an evolution to be Mafia Wars 2. And so I remember writing it to Mark Pincus. He was the president of Zynga at a holiday. I mentioned to him my concerns. I'm like, hey, yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about this. Like, what do you think? And the next day, he went to my boss and mentioned that this guy on your team has this concern about the game. What do you have to say about this? And like basically mentioned me by name. And so that really upset the boss of the game. He had my boss talk to me, put me on a performance plan, basically create like a constructive way to fire me because they were upset that I complained about it.
Yeah.
And I remember my boss telling me like, "Hey, I don't think you're cut out to be a game designer." And like I saw that as really harsh feedback because I'm like, as a manager, you should be helping me figure out how I can be a game designer. Don't tell me how I can't be a game designer.
Yeah.
And eventually, a few weeks later, they had me come into the HR office. They had walked me up to the HR office without even telling me that that's where we're going, and told me I was being fired. I was like, wow, okay. And then I had to go back and pack up my box in front of my best friend and walk out of Zynga without a job anymore. And that was humiliating. But I would say at the same time, it kind of built my like outer shell, my thick skin for this industry, which this industry is really tough and it's really challenging. And it's very ending. And I'm thankful I had that experience early in my career rather than late in my career. And I think it built my resilience in a really big way.
Yeah. And you think the entire episode is like on purpose because there is a certain kind of ways a company work, and if someone comes and try to disrupt it, putting it right there in front of everybody, making sure that you yourself do mistakes so that there is a very strategic plan to throw you out of the company right in front of everybody. Right?
Yeah. I mean, in a way, I think they're setting an example of like, hey, don't do this, otherwise you get fired. But I think that game needed it. I think that game needed people to ensure that it was innovating enough, that it was addressing the audience in a meaningfully new way. Um, and to me, the proof is that that game did come out eventually, and it shut down after a month. So I guess the
Did
question is,
you
yeah,
did you
maybe
write back to
maybe it was
Marcus?
evidence.
Did you write
Yeah. What's that?
did you write back to Marcus?
No, no. You know what?
I told you.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could, but I just I'm not that person. I'm rather than make them feel bad, I'd rather just do better for myself. And I think if you do better for yourself, there's an immense amount of pride just in having that.
Yeah.
And I think that yeah, they ended up having many more problems after that, and I mean they're still doing okay as a company, but I don't think they reached the trajectory that they wanted to as a company.
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
but you rightly segregated, the two types of games. Like one sort of games which are not made for gamers, because there's a lot of this economic design, a lot of it. It looks like a trading business, right? You do that, and then there are these hardcore games which you really wanted to work, right? So that's a great segregation, and that's something that we have also seen in India in the last few years. There's a lot of these kind of, and then that turned into a very illegal RMG kind of stuff also, which is again not games, but a big industry was created here, and thankfully, everything got banned recently. But yeah, you actually worked for a few other companies before joining Naughty Dog, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, right after getting fired from that company, from Zynga, again, which was a very humbling experience. But right after that, a week later, I got a job at another free to play company working on a mobile location based game called Life is Crime. And because I worked on Mafia Wars, they were really interested in my background and experience, and Zynga as well. So I was fortunate to get a job basically almost immediately after getting fired. And at that company, it was a much smaller company with people who understood games, I think, more on a core level. My boss, he had worked at EA before, he had worked on like console and AAA games. So he really understood where I was coming from and what I was looking for. And I thought that was a much better environment. It didn't change the fact that we were working on free to play games. And so I remember designing features for this Life is Crime games. The game is basically a location based. It's kind of like Pokemon Go, but before Pokemon Go.
Okay.
And you would go to locations like Starbucks and other real world locations and commit crimes, kind of like Mafia Wars. And the idea is you're trying to gain reputation. So you're trying to become like the most renowned criminal in San Jose or something, right? In your local area. And I designed this feature called Gangs, where you could form a gang with 3 other players. And my inspiration actually came from like old MMOs like Asheron's Call and stuff. That these really great guild systems, and I really want to recreate that feeling of having like a really tight, small guild, but in a mobile game, which you hadn't really seen that much until that time. And so I created this system where 4 players could form a gang, maximum 4. I wanted it to be a small team because I wanted people to feel like they had a really important part of this game.
Yeah.
And then gangs would compete over reputation. So the gangs got so competitive with this system that there were people who literally started selling real world drugs to get money to pay for playing the game. And I was like, what the hell? What? There was someone who rented a helicopter and flew around along the coast of the United States because we had really good anti-cheat protection to make sure people weren't like cheating with their GPS and having them jump around different parts. This guy rented a helicopter and flew along the coast because he was so addicted to trying to get his gang to be the most successful gang. And so there's a moment I thought to myself of like, okay, I'm proud that I made a system so engaging that people are willing to do this stuff. But I also feel a little disgusted by the fact that someone is selling real world drugs and is like homeless because of that to pay for his addiction in the game. And I just didn't feel right to me. I was like, I don't know if I want to contribute to that as a creator. And then there's still the fact that I ultimately wasn't working on like a real game. I was still working on a game that kind of is just like like an Excel sheet dressed up, and that's not the kind of games I want to make. So yeah, I eventually applied for this other company called Rumble Entertainment, and they were a bunch of ex EA guys who wanted to make a 3D action RPG on Facebook, and that was their main thesis. And they actually got funding from Google. They got like a pretty big initial seed capital from Google to invest in basically making a browser-based game engine, 3D game engine. And this is before Unity and stuff was really that big. So there was actually a lot of credibility behind, hey, can we make a browser-based 3D engine? So I joined that team because I like action RPGs. One of my favorite games of all time is Fantasy Star Online, which is a third-person action RPG, and I like that game a lot. So I was like, okay, I could be really excited about working on this. So I joined that team, and I worked on that game for 2 years. I was one of like two designers in the project, so did pretty much all the monster design, all the level design. The only thing I didn't do was like player mechanics, which is what the game director was doing. He was focused on player mechanics. So I ended up doing a lot on the project. When the game launched, I worked on a lot of the events. So we realized quickly that events are the main way to drive revenue. If you had an event every 2 weeks, the event is basically a dungeon. You play the dungeon multiple times to getting new armor sets. The new armor set is the best armor set in the game so far. And then every 2 weeks, you do another better armor set. And it's just like a rinse and repeat. And we got to this cycle where I was like crunching all the time because I was like the lifeblood of that game's revenue. It was like, okay, I have to keep coming out with events, come up with new boss designs. It was pretty stressful.
Right.
But yeah, at the same time, I was like, okay, I'm kind of tired of this, but I felt like this was just what I was going to do until someone else joined our project, and he had got an interview with Naughty Dog, a phone interview, and everyone was like, "Man, we got to hire this guy because he got a phone interview with Naughty Dog. Like, he's got to be like incredible."
Yeah.
So we hired him, and I started working with this guy, and I'm like, "Man, this guy got an interview with Naughty Dog." Like, no offense, but like I was like, okay, I feel like I'm at least as good as this guy is. So if he can get an interview with Naughty Dog, maybe I should try. I was a huge fan of Naughty Dog at that time. Last of Us was one of my favorite games of all time. Before that, Uncharted 2 was one of my favorite games of all time. And I really specifically loved the multiplayer of Last of Us factions. And I saw that Naughty Dog was hiring a multiplayer game designer. And I looked at the qualifications and I was like, I think I meet all these qualifications. So let me try. So I applied to Naughty Dog and I applied to a couple other much lesser known studios. I was like, okay, and at least I'll get a contact about the lesser known studios. Maybe Naughty Dog will hit me up. And it turns out only Naughty Dog contacted me. Those other studios did. I was like, okay, cool. And I did the phone interview with them, the phone screen, which I immediately felt like I messed up. I was like, oh man, the linear algebra question, I felt like I didn't get that quite right. I remember like emailing the recruiter afterwards, like saying, hey, like this is actually the answer I meant to say it, but I was so nervous. But they were satisfied and they gave me a test. And the test is pretty involved. It's got quite a few pretty technical design questions. And they give you like a weekend to do it. And so I was like, okay, I just spent my entire weekend doing it, like double did it, triple did it. Like, oh, I wanted to make it perfect. And so I sent that in, and they called me back, and they were happy with the test, and they wanted to fly me in for an on-site interview. So I remember before the on-site interview, I was like, I really got to prove to these guys that I can do what I say I can do. So I was a huge fan of Towerfall at that time. Towerfall, the 2D like archery game. And so I was like, why don't I make a 3D Towerfall in Unity and put it on my iPad and bring two game controllers with me to this interview. So when I fly down to LA to do the interview, I'll just bring this with me. We can play during lunch. And so I did the interview with them. It's like an 8-hour interview the whole day. Like you meet basically with every single person on the team you're going to be working with. And for lunch, I remember busting up this iPad and saying, hey, I worked on this over the weekend. What do you think? And they were really impressed. They're fighting against each other, and they're having a lot of fun, and they're asking a bunch of questions about it. And so the interview went really well. And at the end of the interview, they pull you into the president's office, and they basically tell you, hey, you got the job. This is how much we're offering to you. Do you want to take it, or you don't want to have it? And of course, I was like 100% yes. And then I remember calling my girlfriend, she's my wife now, but my girlfriend at the time, and telling her like, hey, I accepted the job at Naughty Dog, but we're moving down to LA. And she was like, okay, sure, let's do it. That was up in the Bay Area before that. So I got the job, and it was like kind of a dream come true. I was like, I couldn't believe it. It was surreal. It was surreal for like the first few years working at Naughty Dog.
Yeah.
I remember I'd bike to and from school, to office and feel like, wow, is this real? Am I actually working at Naughty Dog? I can't believe it. But yeah, I mean, that was my start to working at Naughty Dog.
How long does it usually take from that phone interview to actually getting inside the company?
It really is a very committed decision when you hire someone, because you're investing a lot of energy into like getting them ramped up into the project, ramped up into the culture of the company. If eventually you have to let them go, it's a very long process, especially in California, where you have to they can sue you if you don't if you fire them without cause. So California has actually a lot of protections for employees. So you have to really document very deeply what why they might not be hitting the mark. So like when you hire someone, you have to be like 110% sure this is the right person. Which is a lot of the reason why I feel like I was successful early on in Naughty Dog. People gave me the benefit of the doubt as a new employee that, okay, well, you made it through the interview process in Naughty Dog. Like you must have something that is special about you, that why you're here.
Yeah.
And so I remember being in meetings early on in Naughty Dog and feeling free to give my opinion, give my thought, give my ideas. And they would always say to everyone in the room in lots of meetings, like, oh, there's no bad ideas, because they assume that there's some intellectual reason you have an idea
Yeah.
to bring to the table. And rather than try to find the bad part, they're trying to find the good part. What is a good part of that idea? Even if it's not the whole idea, what's the part of that that's really worth digging deeper into? And so I felt very welcomed at Naughty Dog, despite feeling so intimidated by the talent that was there.
You joined when Last of Us 1 was already out, or 2 also?
2-1. So I joined to work on Uncharted 4. So
Oh, okay.
I worked on the multiplayer side of Uncharted 4. I ended up actually working on the single player as well. But yeah, I joined during Uncharted 4's development. But then I also look at the other half, and I think that there's also a sense, and you've got an audience, and the audience is going to be the one playing your game and engaging in it. And so I see kind of value on both sides of like as the presenter of something, an artist of something, but also as the provider of an experience. And I look at it as like Nintendo versus say like Naughty Dog. Like Nintendo is in the business of making toys. That's really what they are doing. They're making toys. They're making games that they're like toys. You play it, you stretch and you squeeze, and you know, like Zelda's a good example of this, where they let you experiment rather than kind of say something as creators. They let the player feel the fantasy for themselves, and they let the player experience it almost like a toy. Like let me mess around with this and see what I can do with it. Controlling Mario and feeling the joy of controlling Mario is very much an expression of the player playing with a really fun toy.
Yeah.
And so, and especially 90s game development in Japan, they didn't even let their creators put their own names in the credits because they wanted to have this feeling that the game is for the audience. It's not for us to say something.
Mhm.
And this is something I've seen very different between Western and Eastern game development mentality. It's like Western development mentality is much more about, let me give a message. Let me give a message. I want to tell a story. I think there's a lot of power in that. I think there's also a lot of power in creating an experience that players can have fun for themselves. And so I think it's just two different ways of thinking that I find very interesting, especially having studied both sides and kind of engaged both sides.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what else to say on that topic, because there's a lot to that question, really. But yeah, I mean, I think The Last of Us Part Two is a good example of something that has ultimately resonated with people one way or another.
Yeah.
People are still debating it years later, so I think that there is some success there.
Yeah. That itself talks a lot about the game. You've been strongly associated with Last of Us Online as the game director, right? How did that project start for you at Naughty Dog? And personally, what did you hope it would become?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I mentioned, I joined Naughty Dog as a multiplayer designer. So I joined with the intent of working on the multiplayer aspects of Naughty Dog games. So I worked on Uncharted 4 multiplayer. I did a lot of the work on that game. You were a small team of like 6, 7 people, and I did a lot of the technical design. So I did a lot of like the design for the modes, design for the abilities, design for the NPCs you can summon. I did a lot of the technical implementation for that. So I became very well versed in the engine of Naughty Dog and kind of like all design aspects of the whole game and engine. To the point where they pulled me on to the single player in the last like 6 months of development to help them finish the single player side of Uncharted 4. So I worked on the boss battle between Nathan and Rafe,
Okay.
the sword fight. So I did that aspect of the game end to end. So then I worked on Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. I worked on the boss battles for that between Asav and Asav and Chloe. And Yeah, so I've like worked kind of on both single player and multiplayer quite a bit. Even on The Last of Us Part Two, I worked on the fight between Abby and Ellie in the theater, and then I also helped direct the fight between Abby and Ellie on the beach.
Okay.
So I've done a lot on the multiplayer and single player side. And so what that did was it gave me this really sort of full picture of design of like there's a lot of things that are specific to multiplayer design that are much more systemic. And there's a lot of things that are more about single player design in terms of cinematic presentation and cinematic storytelling. And that really having experience on both sides really inspired me to think, what would a multiplayer game look like if it was really cinematic? Because a lot of multiplayer games, and I'm a huge multiplayer gamer, by the way. That's like I played a ton of Halo, Smash Brothers. I grew up on like shooters and multiplayer games. I'm a very competitive gamer myself, so I love multiplayer. And I think something that really attracted me to the Last of Us factions, the first Last of Us multiplayer, and why I like it so much, was it's so immersive. I felt like I was playing the single player, but in a multiplayer setting. And so I was inspired by how can you take that much further? How can you take that multiplayer and make it feel even more immersive, even more cinematic? I was watching this movie, No Country for Old Men. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. And there's this one scene in that movie where the main character he's sitting on a bed and he's got a shotgun pointed at the door as he's hearing the other guy go up the stairs and hearing the footsteps, the footsteps, the footsteps.
Yeah.
And the guy stopped in front of the door and you see the shadow underneath the door like form, meaning he's right outside of the door. And it's this very tense moment. It's ultra cinematic.
Yeah.
But it really the whole movie is about these two guys hunting each other.
Right.
Or really one person hunting the other run away. And so I was very inspired by what could a multiplayer game feel like that's like that, where you have two people who are hunting each other in an extremely cinematic way. And I felt like The Last of Us was the perfect fit for that. Like a Last of Us PvP game,
Yeah.
where it felt like they were hunting each other at this really personal, intimate level, was something I hadn't played in a multiplayer game so far. And it just didn't even feel like what multiplayer games are trying to do. I feel like multiplayer games are trying to go more like Overwatch, like esports, and really, really gamey. I was like, okay, we're never going to be that.
Yeah.
So what if we went the opposite direction? What was something super slow burn tension, really, really cinematic? And so that was the basis for which we started prototyping this Last of Us multiplayer game. And it just like hit like immediately. Like we played it and it was so engaging. It was so tense. My heart was racing. I had this Apple Watch, and if sometimes your Apple Watch will warn you if your heart rate's really high,
Yeah.
but you seem to be doing anything like in terms of like a workout or anything, and it's concerned. Right? It's concerned. Are you like okay? Like is something happening to you? And I would get that like multiple times playing our game because it was so tense and it was so immersive. Um, so yeah, I mean that was kind of the basis for the design of something that was unlike anything you had seen out there. And that was my goal was to bring that experience to players. And I mentioned this in a previous podcast, but a lot of that came from a very personal experience I've had, where I've had kind of like I wouldn't call it near death experiences, but really threatening experiences where people mugged me at gunpoint in the U.S. And
Okay.
it was a very traumatic experience for me because I mean I think it would be for anyone who's experienced it, but it really is one of those moments where you feel like, man, someone could kill me right now.
Right.
And oftentimes they're threatening to kill you over almost nothing. Like it's just they're really desperate. They need $100 to fuel an addiction or something or whatever it might be. It's really sad,
Yeah.
but they're in that position and they're willing to do that to you over that. And when I look at The Last of Us as a world, it's basically that. Like it's people like the hunters in The Last of Us One, the hunters faction, the guys who stop Ellie and Joel on the highway to rob them and kill them and rob them. They're doing the same thing. They're robbing them for like whatever's in their backpack right now, which might not be that much,
Right.
but that's how they survive.
Yeah.
And so I saw an opportunity to make a multiplayer game that embodied that relationship of like, I'm going to hunt someone because I just need the few supplies in their backpack and I'll chase them through hallways and out of the open and into dangerous areas just to get the stuff that's in their backpack and I'll hunt them till I kill them. And the idea was to really not celebrate, but like really emphasize the human weight of that. Very different than Call of Duty. The Call of Duty is like everyone you kill someone, you respawn.
Yeah.
It's like theatricized war.
Right. Right.
Whereas what I wanted was the feeling of like I'm going to kill this one person. I'm going to see the lights go out of their eyes. I'm going to feel bad, but then I also need the supplies out of their backpack. And like, I want that sense of weight of like killing someone is a really major
Yeah,
deal, you
yeah.
know? And so again, the Last of Us IP felt like the perfect fit for that experience in a multiplayer game. And I feel like that was something that we really achieved really early on in the development. Um, and so the nugget there was something that was really worth building, in my opinion.
How long did you work on that? And I think it it was like you. I remember you mentioning it was around 80% complete before cancellation.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to say like 80% means that the game was a lot of the way there, but as everyone knows, the last 20% can take a lot of effort. So I do want to clarify that aspect. But I would say like the design was really 80% there. It was very playable. The game's really fun. Um, Worked on it for quite a while. So after Uncharted 4 and Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, we basically started working on a multiplayer project that eventually became The Last of Us Online. Um, I myself ended up working on The Last of Us Part Two to help finish that in the last 9 months of development. But I was working on this before that, and then after The Last of Us Two finished up, then a large portion of our team ended up working on The Last of Us multiplayer, and that's where the game really got into like a full production cycle. So I'd say the game was in like a proper production cycle for about 3 years before it got canceled.
Got it, got it.
So a lot of like kind of design, exploration, experimentation for years before that with a really small team that I was part of at that time too.
Got it, got it, got it. So you're in Tokyo now. What's
Yes.
happening? What are you building?
Yeah, I can't say too much about what we're building yet, other than to say that for me, I want to continue making multiplayer games. I two aspects of multiplayer for me. One, I really love multiplayer games, but I really love developing multiplayer games. And part of that is because I've worked on both single player and multiplayer, and there's a really big difference to me in terms of development culture around single player and multiplayer. Single player, at least this is the way it was in Naughty Dog for me, was you're all working on your own bubbles. And in fact, because a lot of us are fans of the games, play before when you play into consumer and stuff like that. So everyone ends up being these little teams working on different parts of the game. Multiplayer, you're playing the whole game together as a whole team.
Yeah.
And there's something really electric about playing the game together as a whole team, or almost feels like a LAN party. Like when every time I play our multiplayer playtests, it feels like we're in a little LAN party together. And we're all playing. We're like cursing each other, like "What the hell, man? Like what?" Like you get these like amazing reactions when you play multiplayer against each other, and it builds this cool camaraderie. And it's just so fun because even early in development, the game is actually pretty fun because you have the people making it fun. My time working in single player versus my time working on multiplayer, I have so much more fun making multiplayer games. Like it's just so much more fun all the whole way through. And so definitely decided that I want to continue making multiplayer games, and that's what we're making now. We're making a multiplayer game. The studio is still pretty early on, but it includes people that I've worked with in the past, including the creative director of our studio, who used to be my creative director partner at Naughty Dog. So I was a game director, and he's a creative director, working together on The Last of Us multiplayer. And we are now together at this studio making our own thing. So he's actually based in the US, and I'm here in Tokyo. And we're forming a team, and I'd say look, we're about 10 people now, and the majority of our team is here in Tokyo. Because as I've gotten to know people here in Tokyo and network with people, I found some really incredible talent here in Japan. But then the other thing is that the game we're making, it's got a Japanese anime theme to it in presentation. So it's like a 90s anime, kind of like Cowboy Bebop, Ghost in the Shell, like that era of anime. So we want to do that style of rendering and that style of world. So working with people here in Japan who some of the people might have even worked on those IPs in the past, but certainly love and understand that genre. Those are the people we want to work with, and finding people here who authentically understand it was a really big part of forming this team in the studio.
Got it, got it. Before I wrap up, just have like a couple of more questions. Um,
Yeah,
just for the audience, because you worked at Naughty Dogs, how was the experience working with Neil?
it was. I mean, look, I developed a very close relationship with Neil. I was there for 10 years, and a lot of my progression going up to game director was through his support. I mean, he believes in me really early on. Him and I connected and shared insights and thoughts, and I think he saw a lot of potential in me as a leader, me as a game developer, and so through his kind of endorsement, I was able to get to where I was as quickly as I did. In fact, I think I was the youngest game director at Naughty Dog. I was also like the youngest lead designer. Like, there's a lot of that I can attribute to him believing in me. So that was a really great relationship. I think he taught me a lot of things, a lot of the way of thinking and approaching kind of challenges of development, challenges of managing a team. Um, Overall, I have a lot to thank him for, and I think he is a brilliant designer. I think what separates him from a lot of directors that I've heard about is that he is a really good game designer. Like, he's not just a storyteller; he's also has a really strong game design sense that lets him understand what makes a game fun. Why is it important to have this in the game? And yeah, and I think that also because he keeps up to date with games too. Like, I remember him and I would frequently compete. Actually, when the new game would come out, we would be like racing to see who could finish it first. I remember that happened with Returnal when Returnal came out. Him and I were like texting back and forth, like, "Okay, what level did you make it to?" Which then there's like a kind of like a little friendly competition. But I respect that about him. That despite how long he's been in the game industry, he still keeps up to date with all the latest games, and it helps him keep perspective. So that makes it a lot easier to work with him, I think, because we can talk about those things.
That's great insights. Thanks for sharing, man. One last thing before we wrap this up. I've been doing content for like 7 8 years, and I've come across this one question every time on YouTube is that how can someone from India actually forget Naughty Dogs, but just let's talk about the bigger AAA companies. How can one actually get there from India? Just a generic piece of advice that you can give.
Yeah, absolutely. I think proof is more important than anything. Like actual real developed work. And especially indie stuff goes a really long way. Like, I'm much more impressed when I see someone who's created their own game, their own their own interactive thing that wasn't part of a huge company, because I know that they built that,
Yeah,
like, piece for piece,
right.
and that's always impressive to me than seeing, okay, they got a level in a game, and who knows how much of that level they did versus, like, it's harder to disentangle that. But if you have your own creation, even if it's a small game, it doesn't have to be a big game. It doesn't have to be like an open world RPG. In fact, if anything, I think you'd be more impressed if you made something that's fun, that doesn't have all these other aspects. I think that that's a big case for me, because it indicates skill and passion.
Right.
If you're willing to do that on your own, and anyone who's been in game development knows how much work it is to make your own thing, and how many hours, weekends, late nights that you end up working to make that happen. When you see someone do that, they're doing it not just because it's a job for them, but because this is something that they live and breathe. And I think that's the biggest advice I can give is make something like that. Invest your extra hours in making that happen, because I think that's going to speak a lot more, or at least as much as any resume would.
Great, man. Great. That's kind of an eye opener because a lot of people have no clue and they keep on digging a lot of stuff on, um, because there is this understanding here in India that it's quite impossible to get there unless you have like 15 years of experience building stuff here. Do you think anyone with like 1 year of experience with what you said, like creating a kick-ass project of their own from an indie perspective and then kind of applying to companies like this would have a chance?
Well, let me tell you this, because I've hired quite a few people, and some of our best hires in all my time in Naughty Dog were people fresh out of college, believe it or not, with no experience. And one is because I think that they just got this fresh energy. They just really
Yeah.
want to make something right, so they're really committed and they really want to do it. But yeah, part of it is that because they haven't been set in their ways of this is how we have to do game development, they are they're much more open to learning how to make it happen. Learning the latest ways. They probably spent more time making games on their own because that's what they had to do to get the job. So they have that passion. And so I would say that a good number of people that we hired over the past 10 years in Naughty Dog were fresh out of college. I'd also say some of the best people in leadership positions, believe it or not, came from QA at Naughty Dog, and ended up being some of the strongest people. Because again, more than anything, I mean, its skill is a huge component, but so is the passion.
Yeah.
Because, like I said at the very beginning of this podcast, like it's game industry is not easy.
Right.
It's not a job. It's like a lifestyle. Like you do it. It's much more than just a 9 to 5 job. It's something that you end up thinking about as you're falling asleep, as you're waking up. It's something you love doing. And you have to love doing to have the sort of perseverance and the energy and enthusiasm to keep on going, keep on going. So no, I don't think it's impossible to get into a AAA company with not 15 years of experience. If anything, I think it's more possible than ever, because there are tools for you to be able to show that you can do it before you join. Like Unreal, it's easier to make a game than ever before. If you have an idea and you can think of like what's the simplest way to execute it to show that it's something interesting, like I think that's a power in its own too.
Got it. Got it. Thanks a lot, Vinit. It was great chatting with you. Thank you for your time. I really, really appreciate it.